And up next, we welcome Robin Daniels, Chief Business Officer of Zensai, and Jeanne DeWitt Grosser, who is a COO of Vercel. What a pleasure. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Doing
Excellent. Thank you.
great. It was awesome to see the previous presentation, that's for sure. Also, as an ex-boxer, very proud to see that we're still carrying the torch forward. So very, very good.
Amazing. We have the best COOs in the B2B land and the most innovative. So, yeah, Robin, let's kick it off.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Thank you, Julia. And Jean, so good to see you. Today, we're going to talk about how do you build an AI native business? What does that mean for decision making, speed? How do you think about people, infrastructure, your competitive moat, all of that stuff? There's so many questions I think going through the minds of leaders everywhere around what an AI native business really is. How's it different than a traditional business, and so on. So we're going to get into all of that, and we're hopefully going to try to contrast that with some of the more, maybe, let's say, traditional SaaS companies or first generation tech companies out there, and what should they be doing that's different. And we're here today with just an absolute phenom, Jeanne DeWitt Grosser. If you have not met her, or you don't know who she is, you absolutely should. She is the COO over at Vercel, and she oversees marketing, sales, customer success, revenue operations, and even field engineering. And she's building this AI native company for the next billion developers. Super impressive. Before she was at Vercel, she was at the chief business officer at Stripe. Also a very impressive company that I think many of us, of course, know, where she helped build that organization from the ground up. Before she was at Stripe, she was at Dialpad, where she was the chief revenue officer. Before Dialpad, she was at Google in various leadership roles, and she carries multiple degrees from Duke and Stanford. Super impressive. So again, like I said, a total badass. And who am I? Well, I'm Robin Daniels. I'm the chief business officer at Zensai. We're a scale-up company based out of Denmark, where I'm originally from, but I live in the US now. Prior to here, I have held multiple CMO roles at various companies, including Salesforce and Matterport and WeWork and other companies. I was early days at Box and at LinkedIn and lots of other different companies where I've usually been on the go-to-market side as well. So good to have you, Jeanne. Where are you dialing in from?
I am in the Vercel office in downtown San Francisco.
Amazing, right where it's all happening. It's true. It's like
Yep.
the level of intensity has really kind of maybe let's just kick it off and start talking about this. So let's talk about a little bit about what you're doing over at Vercel to like really take advantage of this moment that we're in time. Let's start with one of the ones around velocity, both around how we think about shipping products, how we think about decision making, and all those kind of things. And we see this, if you go on any kind of news site, you go on LinkedIn or X or whatever it is, it seems like these AI native companies are literally shipping new features, products in days, sometimes within like multiple times a day and so on. This is very different, of course, than how traditional tech companies do it. So is that the right way to do it? Are we going to run into trouble? Is this like the way of the future of innovation, or is it just kind of more like chaotic because that's what the market demands? Like how do you think about velocity and speed in this age that we're in?
Yeah, if you've been in San Francisco, you may have seen a billboard or two because Vercel has a lot of them. And one of them is you can just ship things, which is one of our sort of core principles at Vercel. And I would say actually a lot of what Vercel's platform does is try to enable teams with our developer platform to be able to ship hundreds of times a day. You used one word that I think is super important in this concept, in this discussion, which is velocity. And I do think folks can conflate speed with velocity. And the difference with velocity is obviously that there's direction. So there's a strategy, you know where you're headed. One of the things I'm 6 months into Vercel, and I've been incredibly impressed by the rate with which we ship things. And there are two things that I think we've gotten right this year that have enabled us to ship faster while still not having a sense of chaos. The first one is really around having clarity of metrics. And having them be both detailed if you want to go into 5 whys, but also simple at a high enough level. So we spent a lot of time iterating on this at Vercel and actually came up with there are 3 things we're here to do. Vercel managed compute. So how much of your core application are we running? Vercel managed tokens. We're in the AI business now. So what percent of the world's tokens are running through our infrastructure? And then Vercel managed requests. So how much of the internet are we fronting? And that's been really helpful. All of those track directly with revenue growth as well, so they can be shared across product teams and go-to-market teams. I think the other biggie, because I know this is more GTM oriented, is having a really clear operating model. So this is one of the things I put in place at Stripe. First thing I did in my first 30 days of Vercel is actually the bottoms up what needs to be true to hit a revenue goal. And so, this is pretty straightforward funnel and math. How many leads do you need? At what rate do they convert to ops? At what rate do you win them? What's their cycle time? All of that, by segment, by geo, every possible cut. But it's another one that I think is really key because it helps you rapidly determine when you're moving quickly, where do you either have a good thing going and you should go pour gasoline on that fire, or where do you need to course correct and fix something. So in particular at Vercel, adding in segment level cuts has helped us understand, okay, we just rapidly released something to support backends. Do we have product market fit in the segments we thought we did or not? You can quickly go and look at win rates, at your cycle time, et cetera. And so that's been useful here as well.
I love the word clarity. It's something I speak about, I think, until I'm blue in the face. I've led several keynotes and LinkedIn posts about this. It's probably, because I always say that the most important thing for companies is to get clarity. Because it's very hard to do great work if you're not clear on what you're trying to achieve in the first place. And that starts, of course, with the mission, but then it also goes down to the strategy. And then it also helps dictate individual behaviors, because I think it can create a lot of toxicity in the workplace, political infighting, if you're not clear on what you're trying to achieve in the first place. So you mentioned that. So at Vercel, if we dig a little deeper, what does clarity look like at Vercel? You mentioned metrics, but there must be probably more around governance and operating models and so on. What is clarity to you?
Yeah, I mean, my job as COO is actually to put in place what I'm calling our company operating system. And so it's all of that, the unsexy language of governance, et cetera, to make sure, are we actually doing what we said we were going to do? And I think you've got to find ways to both be rigorous and lightweight. Folks, because again, folks really want to be moving quickly right now. And so there are a couple of things that we're doing at Vercel that work really well, where we sort of have the top, let's call it, we're about 650 odd folks at Vercel, call it the top 25 people, basically sort of founder, his directs and their directs. We're actually getting together for 90 minutes every Monday, all of us, which when I first arrived, I was like, wow, that's a lot of people, very expensive meeting. But I will say, I think in this moment, shared context is probably one of the most important things at the company, back to your point on clarity. And so I've come to love this meeting, even if sometimes I find it chaotic, or there are, moments where maybe we're discussing a topic I didn't think we needed to go that deep on, but everybody actually then has the opportunity to get on the same page. I think the other thing that Vercel does really nicely is just our company all hands. It's another one where those are every other week. You're going through, as an example, the 3 large metrics that I just talked through. We reiterated for the third time at our all hands on Tuesday. So I think we've increased the level or the frequency of broad-based communication, because I think any good leader will tell you repetition doesn't kill the message.
Absolutely. I think it's fair to say that Vercel is a rising star, and probably I'm sure will rise very far with you there as well. But it's a smaller company, and you came from a big company, Stripe, that probably most people have heard about, at least around the world. I think this is going out to a fairly broad geographic segment. How's your current role, and you think about this thing different than how it was at Stripe? Because of course that is powering the infrastructure, payment infrastructure of the internet. I'm sure you can't just skip things every hour and so on because of the impact it might have. How's the contrast? Because I think that might be relevant to if you're listening in from a bigger company and you're trying to become AI native, AI first. How were you doing it before you came to Vercel? How were you thinking about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So I joined Stripe when there were 400 employees. I joined, Vercel a little bit sub 600. So arguably, Vercel's a bigger company than when I joined Stripe. And they actually have a fair number of commercialities because they're both sort of platform infrastructure players. Stripe, economic infrastructure for the internet. If Vercel does what it means to do, we hope to be building the AWS of AI. And so in both of those cases, you are ultimately building building, the platform that others build on top of. And so you not only have to move quickly to stay at the forefront of innovation, but you also don't get to get it wrong, because if you get it
Mm-hmm.
wrong, you take everybody else down with you. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think that just like begets more rigor in certain
Mm-hmm.
parts of the organization than others. Vercel, as an example, has an extremely sophisticated SRE team, because we've got to have, all the nines of uptime, relative to most companies, I would say, at our size and scale. Similarly, security is something we cannot get wrong. That was also true at Stripe. So we're sort of over invested relative to a company of our size and scale on the security front. So I think that sort of ends up being, basically like, what are some of the core things that your company absolutely can't get wrong, or where you find,
Mm-hmm.
more investment out of the gates?
Makes a lot of sense. Let's shift gears a little bit to go to market, something I'm also super passionate about. I oftentimes think that you can win a market in one of three ways: either by having the best product, the best business model, like price, packaging, and pricing, packaging, and so on, or the best kind of brand slash community, kind of something that people love and feel like they're part of. And I think the best companies of all, they kind of do all three in
Yep.
various different ways. But I also think that the idea of having the best product, being the first to something or the best of them, is shrinking. It used to be maybe you had like a 3-year advantage, maybe 5, maybe even 10, right? Depending on how
Yep.
good your tech was and so on. Nowadays, because of AI native companies, that seems to be shrinking.
Yep.
So my sense is a lot of the advantage is going to become more around the brand and the community. And the thing about Lovable is a great example out there. I think it's a darling of the internet right now. I'm not the tech expert, but I'm not sure that their advantage is all just about tech. But it seems like the community loves it. The brand is super hot right now, so they've got that mode there. But any mode, of course, over time can be eroded as well. So you got to like really think about like all three as well. And I could be wrong. I'm just kind of like trying to like read the tea leaves of what's happening out there in the industry and try to place my own bets. As the chief business officer of my company, how are you thinking about moats, especially in the go to market arena?
I actually really agree with you. I came to this conclusion a while ago, and it's probably taken longer to play out. But so my first job out of college was working on Gmail. And,
Mm-hmm.
for folks who might remember, Gmail launched with a gig of storage, and it was just
Mm-hmm.
crazy. Like, how could they have done that? And it took Yahoo well over a year to be capable of replicating that, because their own infrastructure couldn't support something like that. And so, I basically grew up in this era where, you had real technology advantage. And as I sort of continued in my career, I saw that
Mm-hmm.
shrink as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I went to Stripe, actually, one of the things I would always tell my go-to-market team, and I think this is even more true now, is that increasingly one of the things that will differentiate one company from another is the experience that you have interacting with that
Mm-hmm.
company.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's very true in this moment. Again, I tell my sales team, I think there's been no better time to be in sales, because arguably people are making incredibly high risk decisions, and it's
Mm-hmm.
become less obvious which decision is right. Like, there's no such
Mm-hmm.
thing as like, you don't get fired for buying IBM right now, because like it's just,
Mm-hmm.
there's not a clear winner in any space. And in most spaces, actually,
Mm-hmm.
there's hyper fragmentation. So you've
Mm-hmm.
got 10 options to look at. I think it's fair to say the market probably can't support 10 in most of these categories.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think a lot of decisions will be made based on, did a human actually help you feel confident in making that decision, and give you confidence that after you'd made it, there was going to be someone on the other side to make sure you really succeeded.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I do actually think that the brand community matters.
Mm-hmm.
I also would purport, like, we are going to go through a new phase on sort of like the UX and the experience that you have from a technology perspective as well. And so the
Mm-hmm.
companies that invest in figuring that out,
Mm-hmm.
so it doesn't all have to be, human oriented, I think will also differentiate as we sort of get the next interaction model right.
Makes total sense. I think of it also as I'm an eternal optimist that we live in amazing times, I think, and I think there's no better time. Like I think it sounds like you're just talking a lot about on the sales side. I think a lot about it on the marketing side because I've been a CMO for many times in my career, and there's no better time to tell the story of who you are and what you do. The amount of like opportunities to get the story out there and make people fall in love with you are immense. Whether you want to be on TikTok or podcasts or videos or whatever it is, LinkedIn. There's so many options for you. So I think we like live in this golden age of storytelling, and where I think people crave connection and humanity.
Yeah.
Having said that, the downside, I think, of being in this golden age of storytelling is that there's so much noise out there because the barrier to entry in these channels have become so low. And so it requires a key word that I'm trying to instill in my team, but also I talk about a lot these days for any GTM leader, which is courage, because you have to have the courage to tell a different story, to be different, to have a different point of view, to actually elicit an emotion somehow. I think it goes with like you're doing one-to-many, marketing, or you're doing one-to-one in sales, and you're like speaking to a customer. The courage to be different and have a different story and a point of view and stand for something, I think is going to matter more than ever because again, so many of the other moats are going to become virtually non-existent in many ways. So it's about how do you connect really, and we heard that from the previous panel as well. What are you doing like specifically at your company now? You're getting 6 months in. What are you seeing is working or not working so well around like your ability to tell that story to the market? Because you're also probably in a very competitive space already, right? How are you enabling your sales team, your go-to-market team, your marketing team, and so on to be out there and to win?
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer this two ways. So one of the things that attracted me to Vercel was our founder, Guillermo, who is an exceptional storyteller, and a
Mm-hmm.
frequent on podcasts because he's very opinionated, and you
Mm-hmm.
tend to learn from him. So, very much plus one to your point of view as well of folks having courage to put something out there, have it be well thought out. I certainly have seen. I think on the go-to-market side, go-to-market teams have talked about being consultative for as long as I've been in go-to-market. But I think that has often been like a veneer of, I can put in
Right.
different case studies if you're a manufacturing company versus a tech company, but otherwise it's the same product, same pitch. And I actually think that'll be another one is, what we're seeing is when we go out to companies, they know that they need to be doing more with AI. They know they should be building agents, but they actually don't know what agent they should build, how they should build it. And so a lot of what I find myself doing is being able to either take best practices, because Vercel is extremely AI forward internally, and contextualize them to that company, or be the type of person who can actually help you problem solve rather than just say, by the way, if you want to build that AI gateway would be a sweet way to do it. So I do actually think that sales teams that really learn how to help a customer think through novel problems and solve them are more likely to be successful in this era.
Yeah, absolutely. In 2000, I bought a one-way ticket from Copenhagen to San Francisco because I'm a nerd and I wanted to be with all the nerds of the world. And that turned into a 25 plus year adventure of in various different companies. And I remember one of the stats I read right before I bought that one-way ticket was that out of 20 companies that start, 15 will fail, 4 will do okay, and maybe 1 will hit the jackpot. How do you think that is in today's AI native world? Like, and how do you stand out? How do you survive? I think that's question one. And the second one is, what if you're not AI native? What do you do to survive in this hyper competitive world? What would you be doing if you're working for a more traditional company than Vercel? I'm very curious to get your take on both.
Yeah, I was reading something about, to your point on like not all startups making it, about like the Lindy effect, which is like the theory that non-perishable things future life expectancy is proportional to its current age. And so it's interesting because you have all these startups that are hitting 100 million in ARR arguably before they've necessarily found product market fit. And so I think the ones that are going to be successful, Stripe had a phrase that I really internalized that stuck with me around, we haven't won yet. And so just because, you're at the top of some ARR leaderboard doesn't mean that that's going to continue in perpetuity. I think you see we're in a phase right now of blank check writing for AI. Everyone's got an AI mandate, and you can go out and play with things. But a lot of these are going to wind up being vitamins rather than medicine. And a lot are going to wind up being point solutions rather than platforms. I think one of the things, as an example, that we've been doing is so we have V0. It is a vibe coding product similar to a Lovable. And we've been actively recommending that folks decrease their deal size with us. Cut your spend in half. I know you think you want this for 400 PMs and designers, but we actually think you should start with 100 and fundamentally change the way that your workflow behaves for software development lifecycle, and then go roll it out to the next 300. And the point is, then we can go get really deep with them, help them actually turn this into true medicine, where it is accelerating their ability to get to market. I think for companies that are trying to become more AI forward, in many cases, it may be best to have a parallel product that just is itself AI native. And then rather than doing what a lot of folks are doing, which is sort of like bolt on an assistant. I think everybody could do that for wave one. But for wave two, most existing products don't lend themselves well to becoming truly agentic, or ultimately what I would call like an autonomous agent. And reason being is I would hypothesize that most software is today, you're sort of forced into a workflow that software company decided was the best. But none of us have ever really gone into Salesforce, Workday, Jira, and said, this is exactly how I want to work. And so the future, I think, is actually going to be headless or composable software, where you've got, some sort of database, you've got an MCP server to access that. And then actually the front end is bespoke either to the company's workflow or to that individual's. Or increasingly, there is no front end because you have an agent that's working autonomously in the background on an end-to-end workflow. And so if you're over-rotated towards your existing pixels, you're probably never going to get to that autonomous agent end of the spectrum, and you risk somebody else getting there first.
I think it's safe to say you've had an epic career. I mean, look at the companies you've worked for and led. So you've scaled teams, you've hired probably thousands of people, would be my guess at this point. But the last topic, just for the last couple of minutes we have, is really around people, something I'm super passionate about myself. What do you think the skill set is, the mindset that you need to have to survive as an employee or a leader in the next couple of years?
Yeah, as a leader, I think, so a huge reason that I joined Vercel was I've always thought of myself as more like an inventor, an entrepreneur. I'm passionate about reinventing my function rather than trying to reinvent a product. And I think the leaders who are going to be most effective and the highest performers within those orgs will develop that type of mentality. There are a set of things that have worked that got us here that probably have a place in the world going forward, but many of the practices and approaches are going to need to be rethought. And so I came to Vercel and arguably like a couple months before the AI wave of Vercel really started taking off, because I believed this would be a company where I could go write the go-to-market playbook of the AI era. And so I think one of the things, I've personally been doing is I created a go-to-market engineering team. I think a lot of folks are doing that these days, which is kind of my set of people that are helping me say, okay, over here, we're going to go first principles, figure out how go-to-market should be done in this era, while I have this large sales force over here continuing to sprint at something that's not totally broken. And then once I master, what I think can be the next way of doing things, and, we'll start to roll it out over here. So it sort of helped us walk and chew gum at the same time.
This GTM engineer, I love this idea. What's the mindset of the people that you're hiring for that kind of org?
Yeah, I'll give you an example of one of the first things we built, which was a lead agent. So a lot of folks have heard in the market AI SDRs. We actually built our own in-house. It took one go-to-market engineer 6 weeks, and it cost us about $1,000 annually to run the thing end to end. We used to have 10 SDRs on inbound contact sales, and we now have one. And the one we have is an agent manager. And so the mentality is like a lot more data oriented, so being very analytical and a lot more process oriented. So what we talk about is actually when it comes to making things agentic, what you're doing is context engineering. And what that really means is, can you make your best in class process legible is what we call it, which is effectively like, can you document best in class? And if you can, an agent can do that better, as good as, if not better, than your best in class human. But you actually have to have a strong point of view on what best in class looks like if you want things to be a bit more deterministic. So it sort of is a little bit more, in my view, slightly biased, of like a bit of like an MBA mindset to some of these things, to make them agentic.
Love this. This is very actionable advice. We're at time. Such a pleasure to talk to you. We can talk probably all day. Where can people find you or learn more about Vercel?
Yeah. So just Vercel.com or v0.app. And I'm just Jeanne at Vercel if there's anything anybody wants to talk about.
Awesome. And you can just find me also on LinkedIn if you have any follow-up or questions you want to ask. Happy to connect. Thank you so much, Jeanne. See you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye,
Thank
Robin.
you so much.
Bye.
Thank you, Jeanne and Robin.